In military aviation, the aircraft may be advanced, but the margin for error can be brutally small. A normal takeoff, a training flight, a display routine, or a vertical landing can change in seconds. This video brings together real military plane crash and emergency landing footage, with the story behind each incident, the crews who fought for control, and the moments where technology, training, and luck were pushed to the limit. On February 23, 2008, a U.S. Air Force B-2 Spirit stealth bomber crashed during takeoff from Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. The aircraft was the Spirit of Kansas, one of the most advanced and costly military aircraft ever built. At first, the takeoff looked normal, but inside the aircraft, the flight control system was already receiving bad data. Moisture had affected 3 of the bomber's 24 air data sensors during calibration. That distorted the information being sent to the flight computers. As the B-2 lifted off, the system calculated an incorrect airspeed and a false nose-down attitude. In response, the aircraft commanded a sudden nose-high pitch up. The bomber climbed too steeply, lost speed, rolled left, and the left wing struck the ground. At that point, the crew had almost no altitude and no time to recover. Both pilots ejected before the aircraft crashed and burned. The bomber was completely destroyed, with the loss estimated at about $1.4 billion. Investigators later found that the pilots had followed the correct procedure, but the aircraft's automated systems had been misled by faulty sensor data, turning a routine takeoff into the first crash of a B-2 Spirit. On July 18, 2006, a Royal Australian Air Force F-111 was forced into an emergency landing at RAAF Base Amberley in Queensland, Australia. Shortly after takeoff, the control tower told the crew that the aircraft had lost its left main wheel. That meant a normal landing was no longer possible. The crew stayed in the air for several hours, burning fuel while pilots, engineers, and support crews worked through the safest way to bring the aircraft back. On final approach, the F-111 came in with the landing gear problem still unresolved. The crew used the aircraft's arresting hook to catch a cable across the runway. The aircraft touched down on its belly, throwing sparks as it slid along the runway. Despite the hard landing, the crew brought the jet to a stop and escaped safely. The aircraft was badly damaged, but the emergency showed how planning, cockpit discipline, and ground support can turn a serious mechanical failure into a survivable landing. On October 17, 2022, a Russian Sukhoi Su-34 fighter bomber crashed into a residential area in Yeysk, Russia. The aircraft had just taken off on what officials described as a training flight. Shortly after takeoff, one of the engines reportedly caught fire during the climb. Video from the ground shows the aircraft descending toward apartment buildings, with both crew members ejecting shortly before the crash. The Su-34 came down near a 9-story residential building, triggering a large fire and spreading fuel and debris across the area. Both pilots survived, but on the ground, the outcome was devastating. Russian officials later reported that 15 people were killed in the building and surrounding area. This incident shows how little time there can be when a military jet suffers a serious failure immediately after takeoff. For the crew, ejection was the only remaining option. For the people on the ground, the crash turned an ordinary evening into a major tragedy.
Может быть.
Летел туда, все там самолет.
Какой самолет?
За Миотидой наблюдается сильный пожар.
Какой свет, он горит, 9-этажка уже. Вся вон, все 9 этажей.
On August 21st, 2025, a Royal Malaysian Air Force F-A-18D Hornet crashed during takeoff at an airbase in Malaysia. The jet was accelerating down the runway at night when the situation suddenly changed. Video from the ground shows the aircraft moving at high speed, then bursting into flames shortly after lifting off. Both crew members, the pilot and the weapons system officer, ejected before the aircraft went down. They survived and were taken to the hospital for medical checks. At first, the cause was not confirmed, but investigators later found that the crash was caused by a bird strike during takeoff. A bird struck the left engine at a critical moment, causing the engine to fail as the aircraft was leaving the runway. With very little altitude and almost no time to recover, the crew had only seconds to react. The Hornet was destroyed, but both men escaped alive. This incident shows how dangerous the first seconds after takeoff can be, especially when an engine failure happens before the aircraft has enough altitude or distance to recover. On August 28, 2025, a Polish Air Force F-16 crashed during a rehearsal for the Radom Airshow in central Poland. The aircraft was preparing for the upcoming airshow when the routine turned fatal. Video from the airfield shows the F-16 performing a low aerobatic maneuver before descending toward the runway. Seconds later, the jet struck the ground and burst into flames. Emergency crews responded right away. Officials confirmed that no spectators or people on the ground were injured, but the pilot did not survive. The pilot was Major Maciej Krakowian, known by the call sign Slab. He was a Polish Air Force demonstration pilot with the F-16 Tiger demo team. After the crash, the 2025 Radom Airshow was cancelled. At this stage, the exact cause has not been confirmed. What is known is that the accident happened during an airshow rehearsal at very low altitude, where there is almost no time or space to recover if anything goes wrong. The aircraft was destroyed, and Poland mourned an experienced F-16 display pilot. On November 21st, 2025, an Indian Air Force HAL Tejas fighter jet crashed during a flying display at the Dubai Airshow. The aircraft was performing in front of spectators at Al Maktoum International Airport when the demonstration suddenly went wrong. Video from the airshow shows the Tejas at low altitude before it descends rapidly toward the ground. Seconds later, the aircraft struck the airfield area and erupted into a large fire, sending thick black smoke into the sky. Emergency crews responded quickly and moved in to put out the fire. The pilot, Wing Commander Numanj Sial, did not survive the crash. After the accident, the Indian Air Force confirmed the loss and ordered a court of inquiry to determine the cause. At this stage, the exact reason for the crash should not be treated as confirmed. What is known is that the aircraft was flying a low-altitude display, where there is very little height available if anything goes wrong. The crash destroyed the aircraft and turned a major international airshow into a fatal military aviation accident. On November 11, 2025, a Turkish Air Force C-130E Hercules crashed in Georgia, near the border with Azerbaijan. The military transport aircraft had departed from Ganja, Azerbaijan, and was flying back toward Turkey when the flight suddenly went out of control. Video from the ground shows the aircraft breaking apart in midair, with large sections of the plane falling in different directions. The wreckage came down in eastern Georgia, near the Azerbaijan border. All 20 people on board died in the crash. Turkish officials later confirmed that the aircraft was not carrying ammunition. Turkey also grounded its C-130 fleet for safety checks while the investigation continued. Early findings said the aircraft systems and crew communications appeared normal until the moment of the accident. Investigators also reported no sign of explosives. The exact final cause should not be treated as confirmed yet. What is known is that the aircraft broke apart in flight, leaving the crew with no time to recover. The crash became one of Turkey's deadliest military aviation accidents in recent history.
쌍쌍으로. 오.
On December 15th, 2022, a Lockheed Martin F-35B Lightning II crashed during a vertical landing attempt at Naval Air Station Fort Worth, Texas. The aircraft was still in the production and acceptance phase. It had not yet been delivered to the US military. Video from the runway shows the F-35B descending vertically, then touching down hard. The jet bounced, pitched forward, and its nose struck the runway. A few seconds later, the aircraft spun and slid across the surface, with the pilot still inside. Then, almost at ground level, the ejection seat fired. The pilot came down by parachute beside the damaged aircraft and survived without serious injury. The F-35B is designed for short takeoffs and vertical landings, which allows it to operate from smaller ships and shorter runways. But during this landing, the aircraft lost control at the most critical moment, close to the ground, with almost no room to recover. Later reporting linked the accident to a rare engine vibration problem, which led to inspections, restrictions, and fixes across parts of the F-35 fleet. The aircraft was badly damaged, but the pilot survived. The accident shows how even a highly advanced fighter can become uncontrollable in seconds when a technical failure happens during vertical landing. On September 24, 2017, an Italian Air Force Eurofighter Typhoon crashed during the Terracina Airshow in Italy. The aircraft was flown by Captain Gabriele Orlandi, a test pilot with the Italian Air Force. Video from the beach shows the Eurofighter performing a low aerobatic display over the sea. The maneuver looks normal at first, but as the aircraft comes out of the loop, it is already extremely low. Seconds later, the jet descends toward the water and strikes the sea in front of the crowd. There was no successful ejection. Captain Orlandi did not survive the crash. No spectators were reported injured, but the accident brought the airshow to an immediate halt. The exact cause should not be treated as confirmed from the video alone. What is known is that the aircraft was flying a demanding display at very low altitude, where even a small loss of safety margin can leave no time to recover. The crash destroyed the aircraft and turned a public air show into a fatal military aviation accident. On March 25, 2025, two French Air Force Alpha jets collided in mid-air during a training flight in France. This was not a public air show performance. The aircraft were training near Airbase 113, where the team was preparing for future display flights. Video from the ground shows the formation flying, with colored smoke trailing behind the jets. Seconds later, two of the aircraft make contact in the air. After the collision, both Alpha jets break away from the formation and begin falling toward the ground. The crews ejected before impact. French authorities later confirmed that all three people involved survived. That included the two pilots and one additional person who was in the rear seat of one aircraft. He was described as a passenger. But in this context, that means he was on board one of the military training aircraft, not watching from the ground. All three were found alive and conscious after ejecting. No one on the ground was reported injured. One aircraft came down near an industrial area, while the other crashed nearby after the collision. The exact cause should not be treated as confirmed from the video by itself. What is known is that this happened during close formation military training, where the space between aircraft is extremely small. The two jets were destroyed, but all three people on board survived. a rare outcome after a mid-air collision at low altitude. On May 20th, 2023, a Spanish Air Force EF-18 Hornet crashed at an airbase in Spain. The fighter jet was taking part in a display rehearsal when the flight suddenly went wrong. Video from the airbase shows the aircraft coming down steeply, already too low to recover safely. Seconds before the crash, the pilot ejected from the jet. The aircraft then struck the ground, inside the base, and erupted into a large fire. The pilot survived the ejection and was taken to the hospital. Spanish officials later said his life was not in danger, although he remained under medical care after the crash. No one on the ground was reported killed. The exact cause should not be treated as confirmed from the video by itself. What is known is that the aircraft was flying at low altitude during a display-related flight, where there is very little time to recover if the pilot cannot regain control. The Hornet was destroyed, but the pilot's ejection turned a possible fatal accident into a survivable emergency.
No, pero el piloto se salvó, el piloto salió de paracaídas, ¿eh? El piloto salió de paracaídas, ¿no? No, el piloto salió de paracaídas, ¿no?
On May 9th, 2024, a Bangladesh Air Force YAK-130 advanced jet trainer crashed in Chattogram, Bangladesh. The aircraft was operating near an Air Force base when the flight suddenly turned into an emergency. Video from the area shows the jet extremely low near the runway before it catches fire and continues toward a river. According to Bangladesh military statements, the aircraft suffered a technical problem, and both pilots managed to eject before the crash. The crew also moved the aircraft away from a more populated area near the airport, helping to avoid a larger disaster on the ground. Both pilots were rescued from the river by Air Force and Navy personnel, with help from local fishermen. But one pilot was critically injured and later died in the hospital. The second pilot survived. The Bangladesh Air Force formed a high-level committee to investigate the cause of the accident, so the exact final cause should not be treated as confirmed from the video by itself. What is known is that the aircraft caught fire at very low altitude, the crew ejected, and the jet came down in the river. The crash destroyed the aircraft and cost the life of one Bangladesh Air Force pilot, while preventing wider casualties on the ground.